so we're only going to get one more lesson done before half term, and today we're going to start. The pictures over here may give you an idea on what our new topic is. Just a reminder for you, on Friday you're going to have your respiratory system end of topic, so make sure you have done the work for that. Remember the difference between pathway and process when we're talking about the respiratory system. So our new topic is going to be on the senses. We are roughly on page 160 of the notes book, and our senses, their first job is to give us information about our surroundings. So these essentially are looking for the sense organs. So we have our nose, we have our tongue, does taste for us, tells us what chemicals. We have our eyes, have light receptors. We have our ears, have sound receptors and receptors that tell us where we are. So is my head upright, or am I doing a handstand? And we also have we also have skin receptors. So for all these organs there will be corresponding senses. So sound, sight, smell, touch and taste. Now in terms of chemical messages, so this picture here, we have to figure out what's the stimulus in this picture. So here we have a hand about to grab a very hot pan, and hand is been burning, so they leave it go. So a stimulus is something that brings about a response. So change in which the body responds. So in this case it's the heat, and the response is the reaction to the stimulus. So in this case the response is we would take our hand away, and these two things are interconnected with each other. So if you have a stimulus, there has to be a response, and if you have a response, there has to have been a stimulus to bring it about. So those two things are interrelated. Now we haven't done our nervous system yet. It's one of our last topics this year, but essentially once you touch that pan, there is an electrical impulse is going to go from your hand all the way up through your neurons, through your spinal cord and into your brain, and the different parts of your brain will get information from the senses, and they then make a decision on what's the outcome going to be, what should the correct response be. And we will do more of that in a little while. So we're going to do our diagram drawing somewhere else, but just to say, in terms of touch, we have touch, but we also have temperature receptors in our skin. So different parts of the body will have different numbers of touch receptors, different number of temperature receptors, depending on where it is. So just piece of useless information possibly, but you have loads of temperature receptors in your elbow. So this is why if you're giving a baby a bath, people put their elbows into the water to just how good the heat is, because there's lots of receptors here. And if somebody tries to tickle you on your heel, it's not going to work because there's very few receptors there. Now we're going to go out of this and we're going to do some diagram drawing. So if you bear with me for just 1 second till we just get started. So this is going to be a hair, and we are going to draw 3 layers up here, and once you've done that then you can start drawing. So that's layer 1, layer 2, and this is layer 3. And what we're going to do with the eraser is we are going to make a little slit over here on the right. So now we're ready to get drawing. So we have over here this little section, it is called your epidermis. So EPIDERMIS, and there are 3 layers to it, and I'm going to go 1, 2 and 3. So layer 1 is called your Malpighian layer, and this is actually where your new skin cells get made. So Malpighian layer. Number 2 is called the granular layer, and number 3 on the very top is called your cornified layer, and they spell corn with we will do the skin later on, but the youngest skin is at position 1, and it actually gets older as it goes up at the top. So we are also now going to draw over here a muscle connected to this. So we'll give it some little fibers because it's muscle. we are going to draw over here. Okay, we are going to, so we have your epidermis on the top. We then have this layer here, which is called your dermis. So if you're kind of going to grab a piece of skin off your hand, you're pretty much grabbing, it's all dermis. Apologies for the bad writing, D-E-R-M-I-S. These are going to be our receptors. So over here, just near our little hole here, we're going to draw so down here we have a sweat gland. This is a sweat duct because it's going to carry the sweat to where it wants to go. And this up here is going to be a pore, sweat pore. We also have in and around, we're going to draw it in yellow over here. We also have in and around this hair follicle, it's called a sebaceous gland. So at the joy of puberty, your sebaceous glands get a little bit more active, and this is what can bring about spots. This is a hair. This is what's called an erector muscle. So when you're hot and cold, this hair will go up and down because of that muscle, and this down here is the hair follicle. So underneath here we have essentially a layer of fat, adipose tissue it's called. So if, as I say, you pinch your finger or pinch your arm, you will kind of bring up the chunky monkey piece of dermis, and this is your adipose layer. So these guys here are, this is a touch receptor because it's up near the top, and this one would be the temperature receptor. And these are the ones we're interested in terms of our senses, because they are the ones that have to do with our senses. And we will come back to all of this at a later date. So the only other thing that I'm going to put in here now, on color, is the idea, and we put it down here, is of blood supply. So if you've ever cut yourself, you will know a little cut on your skin, it can actually bring out an awful lot of blood. So what I'm drawing here is a little, this is capillaries essentially. So the blue is what's called a venule, and we'll do it in form 5, and the red over here is what's called an arteriole. Spelled that wrong. So I'm over here on the very right. I still spelled it wrong. So arteriole, A-R-T-E-R-O-I-L-E. And that's where we're going to leave our diagram of the skin for now. So the only thing that I'm really interested in is the fact that we have these receptors, which are for touch and for temperature. Okay, so now in terms of taste, we don't really do an awful lot of taste, but you obviously have a whole load of receptors in your mouth. They go down slightly down the back of your throat as well. So the tops and sides of your tongue and some parts of your throat lining. So you taste bitter at the back, you taste followed by sour, salty and sweet at the top of your tongue. So there's a gap on page 161. You can draw your tongue sideways for yourself and just label it up. So how do we go about tasting? So actually you dissolve what you eat and it lodges in the grooves in your tongue. So if you've ever stuck your tongue out and looked at it in the mirror, you'll actually see that it's loads and loads of little bits of tissue. It's kind of like a wool carpet. So these are the little pieces of your tongue, and the food substances would dissolve, go into those grooves, and then they would be picked up by your taste receptors. And if you've ever been sick and you've tried to eat, you know that sometimes that doesn't work at all. So for our ability to enjoy food is a combination of the taste, the smell, the texture, and even the temperature. So when you're sick, your sense of smell is reduced and it affects how you enjoy your food. In terms of smell, there's not really a lot on the SEC for this, but just the fact that we have olfactory neurons, that's just a really posh word down here for smell. So there's about 20 million of them. They respond to 50 different chemicals, and the combination of those chemicals gives us a whole variety of smells. You don't need the diagram for this. The last diagram that we're going to do is going to be our eye. So it's on the top of page 162. Go back here and we go in here. So just as with our skin, we are going to start with 3 layers. So we're going to draw our first one like this, but as you know, the front of the eye is slightly bulgy. We're going to draw it back here, so that's the outside layer. Up around here, we're going to go for our next layer. So that's really our first. This is really our second. And this is really our third. And in our third, right around here, we're going to give it a little dink back, like so. And 3. So I hope now I've made that clear enough. I might just tidy it up a little bit. Yeah, it should be enough. So what we're going to do is in this very inside layer, we're going to put a tiny little divot into it. And what this is it's called your fovea, and it's the part of your eye where you have the best vision. So the most receptors live there. So up here we are going to go like this and like this. We are going to draw our lens in here, and we're going to have it connected. Up here we are going to draw our pupil, so I'm going to make this person green-eyed. And we're also going to add a tiny layer that is on the front of the lens here. So out the back here, we're going to bring all of this together. We're going to color it in. Now, not the best circles I've ever drawn, but here we are. So we are going to start with over here. So this layer over here is called your conjunctiva. So for anyone that's ever had conjunctivitis, this is the thing that gets infected. We have here is our cornea. So you can get those replaced for you. We have the green here is going to be our iris. The hole here is the pupil. And behind the pupil we have these guys here. I'll make it a big long, is called ciliary muscle. So this will contract and it will change the shape of our lens, which is here, and the lens and the ciliary muscle are connected by what are called suspensory ligaments. The only other thing that I'm going to put in the front, and I'm going to make it blue because it's actually a liquid, is a thing called aqueous humor. And this gives shape to the very front of your eye. And back here in the back of your eye, you have what's called vitreous humor. And again, that gives shape to your eye. So then we start to look at the 3 layers. So the outside layer is called the sclera. Have I spelled that right? No, because I always spell it wrong. So your sclera is the white layer that you actually see when you look at your eyes. So this is a white layer. The next layer, inside here is called your choroid layer, and it is actually black. And this very, very inside layer here is called your retina, and this is where you do your vision. This little notch here is called the fovea, and it's where you have your best vision. So where all of your receptors line up is roughly here, and this is called your blind spot. So you have no receptors here, you actually have no vision here, you do have a blind spot in your vision. And this coming out is your optic nerve. So this is going to take the information from your retina and it is going to get it to your brain. This is where we're going to end today. So when we come back after half term, we'll do the different parts of the eye, we'll do the parts of the ear, and then we will be finished with senses. So I am on Zoom now. If you have any questions, happy drawing.